right. It is episode number 120 of the Nasty Metal Podcast. And the topics for today, well, this is almost more of a shoot the shit kind of one with at least a, actually, for the most part, going to be taken up by a special Q&A segment. So that is going to be pretty much the remainder of this entire podcast episode, since I'm recording this one a little bit later than usual. Didn't get to do it recorded at least last week because for some reason my brain was a blank. Basically, my mind was a blank. Is probably the best way to put it. My mind was a blank. I couldn't think of anything to really want to talk about, and whatever topics just weren't coming to me. So I basically just decided to myself, you know what? Instead of trying to get myself a freaking headache, I would rather just put it off and record it at least maybe next week. And probably record it at least some days before at least Saturday, which is probably when you're going to be listening to this right now, is at least on a Saturday. So, at least Saturday of what? October, let me look a bit. Saturday, October 2nd. So, already into one. That meaning that there was no podcast episode in basically September. Alright. So, normally within the beginning portions of the of my podcasts here, I definitely go into more of like the scheduled content for the channel here. Basically, what is coming? Basically, what are the topics for like the album of the week episodes? What are the reviews and so and so? Is there anything else that's going to be added in there, like a collection update? You know, so and so. I usually pretty much give away that. I announce all that here in the beginning. Well, there really isn't a definitive date or week or so on, or at least a day that I've got at least a review album or at least a album review scheduled. But I will just let you know that coming to the channel here, there's going to be reviews for, of course, the new Portrait album, Priest of Stygia from Ancient Empire, which is actually a request from one of my subscribers. There's going to be of course, coming here real soon. Actually, you know what? It already came anyways. My review for Resurrection Day from Rage. So that was a request from Stormrider. More on Stormrider later. Also, there's going to be reviews for even the new Alice Cooper, which I'm finally going to, since I'm now got a hold of my copy of the album. So there's finally going to be a review for the new Alice Cooper album. Who knows, there's probably going to be a review for maybe possibly the new Cannibal Corpse. I'm not sure. I have no clue, but there might. But don't hold me on that one. I'm thinking of anything else. I think that there's still going to be plenty of reviews coming for plenty of releases on the channel, but those are the ones right now that might be set in stone for sure. The new Portrait, the album from Ancient Empire, and of course the new Alice Cooper album. Whatever comes up is basically just going to be whatever comes up, basically, like in between shit. So that's about it that is coming to the channel. Okay, so as far as what else is, I guess, up within the world of metal, I guess, or music, probably the biggest topic has to be one of the more surprising ones has to be what happened to Richie Faulkner of Judas Priest. Apparently, after having a heart attack, he of course has now had a very successful 10-hour heart surgery, which is crazy because of how that came about. Really surprised by that. But I'm glad that he's recovering. I hope he does have a full recovery and is back on at least the road with the rest of the members in Judas Priest. So that's just a little short one to add in. Another one also to kind of bring up bring up too is the announcement of finally the new Scorpions album. Basically now being given the title of Rock Believer. Not really big on the album title. I think that's kind of a little... I'm not going to say cheesy. It just sounds very uninspiring kind of title, I would think. Especially given for a band that has had some pretty cool album titles anyways in the past. I mean... especially since they're harkening back at least towards the more classic early 80s type of sound. Those albums again like Love Drive and Animal Magnetism and Blackout, Love at First Sting a bit, and they're, you know, those were at least those were kind of cool kind of titles. A bit, though at times maybe a little hokey in some of there, but it was at least very creative kind of titles. Rock Believer is probably the most uncreative title I think they've come up with. But if the album, from whatever teaser I at least had heard when they posted onto Instagram at least very much months ago, if anything's going to be close to being as heavy as that, then it's probably going to be at least a much better album than the actual, basically will be better than its album title, basically. It'll be better. So, there we go. Definitely kind of curious. Apparently, there will be a track that will be released upon, before the release, I guess sometime in October, maybe, for a song that's apparently being titled Peacemaker. So, I'll see if it's basically a full version of what was being heard on Instagram, where they're rehearsing it, or even a different kind of, or even something different and has a more of a raw, more heavier kind of feel too, then it's probably going to be one of the more solid, more better Scorpions albums than, again, since probably the early 90s. So we'll see about that, or maybe since, I'm not going to push it that's going to be as good as, or anything, be close to the tier of like Blackout, or Animal Magnetism, or Love Drive, or any of those three. Of course, let alone the stuff with Uli John Roth, but that is to be given, because without Uli, you can't really, in many ways, really kind of top anything from the 1970s period. But for sure, if it's anything going to be as good as anything, you can probably make something that might be as close to maybe really the those three albums being Love Drive, Animal Magnetism, and Blackout being as good as those, or maybe to an extent Love at First Sting. That's going to be easier, because again, given who's still in the band. But since a lot of the stuff after it, with some of the exceptions of like Crazy World and Face the Heat, the rest of the stuff afterwards, again, like Savage Amusement and so on, and then afterwards, you know, a lot of it was kind of very hit and miss. Return to Forever was an alright album. I thought it had some pretty decent songs, but for the most part, it definitely wasn't going to... It doesn't hold a candle to any of at least the early 80s, or at least the early to mid 80s stuff, or... you know, it wasn't... It didn't really hold a candle to any of those. So we'll see what this one is. But it might end up being at least way better than Return to Forever. But it's probably gonna, who knows if it will be as good as anything that they had released since, or at least anything from like Love Drive or Blackout or Animal Magnetism, you know, those albums. So we'll definitely, I'm very curious. So there we are. Alright, so let me finally get into, well, the main thing of the episode, that being, well, the Q&A segment, which it's been absent since most of these episodes anyway, so it's come back. Of course, it's brought to you by one of my favorite subscribers, that being Stormrider. So, this was, of course, sent to me via Facebook messaging. Stormrider, of course, has given actually, it was more of a task, actually. So, this was the question here. So, yesterday we had a nice chat about Saxon after the Album of the Week episode number 130. that inspired this question for the coming podcast Q&A. I think it would be interesting to hear your, let's say, top 12 or more Saxon albums are. Take care. So there we go. And to answer that, since it was more of a task, this is not the first time though that Stormrider has given me the task of possibly ranking my, basically adding a top sort of list, part of, a Q&A, or at least part of the podcast episodes. One of them I think was like, what are my sort of, at least, what was it, favorite albums or whatnot from like 1983? And then of course another one was my ranking my absolute top list or whatever of AC/DC. Basically, what was I able to rank, given my personal rankings of at least AC/DC's catalog. So that was I think the second time. So this is now the third time, so now I was given the task of basically ranking my 12 or at times more Saxon albums. And to be quite honest, I really couldn't. I could have gone with more, but since I'm missing 2 Saxon albums still. There's still 2 that I'm missing. That being Call to Arms and Sacrifice. So I have yet to get those in the into the collection, but so that's why I probably didn't feel like doing a definitive sort of list ranking of my Saxon albums. But so far, what I've come up with at least is fine enough. It's probably going to be surprising to you that this top 12 to some of the albums I added in there, but this is definitely is a personal list. That is for sure. It's a personal list, so take it as a personal list. You may agree with some of it, you may not, but that's usually to be expected with at least a lot of others' personal list rankings. So, especially when it comes to a band like Saxon, who has a lot of still a pretty big fan base. They are still one of the biggest bands to come out of the new wave or British heavy metal movement. So, and again, a band that I had the pleasure of catching live back in 2015, prior to at least months before they released Battering Ram. So that is still a memory that I still love to this day. I still cherish. Okay, so let me get into it. So what are my 12 album ranking for at least the Saxon albums? How did I rank my 12? So let's get into it. I'm going to be as quick as possible with it, with ranking, with at least running through the rankings here, my list. And I might give you some reasons why, but here we go. Number 12 here is Forever Free from Saxon. Number 11 is Dogs of War from Saxon. Number 10 is Solid Ball of Rock. Number 9 is Battering Ram. Number 8 is Thunderbolt. Number 7 is Innocent is No Excuse. Number 6 is Denim Leather. Number 5 is going to be a little surprise to you, because of this is normally not going to be this high up, at least on any sort of Saxon album. I mean, I don't know how high up our albums like A Solid Ball of Rock or Dogs of War or Forever Free are, especially, let's say, from albums like Battering Ram and Thunderbolt being the really more recent albums from them. I don't know how, or at least even at times, maybe Innocent is No Excuse. I don't know how far up some of these albums are going to be on anybody else's list, but they are. However, the one album that I think that might not be this high up on anyone else's list, especially let alone being the top 5 portion of the of a Saxon list. But my number 5 is the debut, the self-titled debut from them, and I'll get into why. So that's at number 5, and number 4 is Unleash the Beast, surprisingly. Number 3 is Power and the Glory. And finally, my number 2 and number 1s are Strong Arm of the Law and, of course, Wheels of Steel. So there you go. There's my 12, basically my top 12 Saxon albums right there. One of the main reasons why I've got Forever Free, Dogs of War, and Solid Ball of Rock on the bottom Not because I necessarily think those are bad albums or weak albums, just that since for me, I didn't really obtain these albums until the Solid Book of Rock set came out in 2018, since I had received that as a birthday gift in that year of 2018. So there was a lot of other Saxon albums I was able to finally really get around to actually listening to, and some of them I never really spent much time with, but these were, at least of all the albums in there besides Unleash the Beast, which I'll get into why that one is definitely higher up, is, well, for these three, for some reason I just came back to these three, especially Solid Ball of Rock. That's why it's a lot more higher above Dogs of War and Forever Free. And I think Dogs of War is a great album. Forever Free might be the weakest of at least these three, since it was I don't know. It's not a bad album. It's just that I think a lot of the writing on it was a little bit of a step down, but it still was a much more stronger album than, let's say, anything from, like, for example, personally me, Crusader, Rock the Nations, and of course Destiny. Still, it's not nearly as strong as, let's say, Solid Ball of Rock, Dogs of War, or even at times Unleash the Beast, or anything that came out within, like, for example, Killing Time, which, to kind of spoil for you, that is going to be this upcoming Album of the Week episode. So, Saxon albums in a row, basically. 2 Saxon albums in a row there. Alright, so it's not nearly as strong as any of that, or even any ones within the rest of the 2000s, like, for example, like Lionheart, or, goddamn, there's some other ones that are kind of missing. And of course, I don't think it's nearly as strong as, like, Battering Ram or Thunderbolt, so there you go. It's not a bad album, it's just, I felt like it was just a little bit weak in the writing department, but it still is, in its own right, a solid Saxon album. But it definitely, I put Dogs of War and Solid Ball of Rock just above them. But again, these are the three that were still new to me, and I'm still giving quite a bit of time listening to them, even though they've been in my collection since 2018. I'm still kind of feel like I'm new to them, especially some of the other Saxon albums within that set. So there we go. Finally, one of the main reasons why I got Battering Ram and Thunderbolt a little bit higher above is because of they are some of the more recent albums. I was actually some of the first really recent albums I ever purchased from them. Again, Battering Ram, after seeing them play the song live in Reno at the now defunct Knitting Factory in Reno. Again, I was so impressed by the track that I couldn't wait for the album to come out. And since at the time all I had was really Wheels of Steel on CD and Strong Arm of the Law on CD, and of course then obtaining basically all of a sudden getting hold of 2 copies as a part of the that 2014 box set that Parlophone that had released, that contained everything from the first album up to about Destiny. That also included the Eagle Has Landed live album, which I kind of almost thought about putting in the list, but I kept this mostly to like studio albums and really like live albums. So there you go. Still, the reason is because of these are definitely one of the more other really albums I really spent a lot of time because of. I had got these again around the time when I barely had at least a basically not the biggest selection of Saxon albums, basically, even though again I had the set, just that as far as anything else that was after Destiny was pretty much there, absent, besides Unleash the Beast, which I'll get into later. So they were just, again, the more recent albums, and they were definitely ones that are I say I hold quite a bit to my heart. That I hold those albums to my heart there. But they are definitely good albums, right, in a bit. They're good. Thunderbolt, I think, again, I do have it above Battering Ram, but it's still, I think they are both solid albums. I think since I've given them a lot more listens over the years, compared to some of the other ones, at least some of the more other really later albums within the 2000s, It's one of the main reasons why they're in the in my top 12 list here. So there we go. As also then, getting too innocent is no excuse. I know this is kind of very herky-jerky the way I'm wording all of this, which I apologize, but this is all just a spur-of-the-moment kind of list, and since this was all part of a Q&A part of it, this is why everything feels kind of janky a little bit in terms of my wording, but I apologize there. Anyways, kind of get back on track. Reason why Innocent is no excuse is on here of all the albums that at least that came after, you know, Demon Leather and Power and the Glory. This is probably the one exception where I feel where I think this was probably a good album in its own right. This is actually one of the few exceptions of at least the albums after, for example, again, Power and the Glory and Demon Leather. I think compared to like Crusader and Rock the Nations and Destiny, Innocent is no excuse, I feel, was probably the more... I don't know, I felt like it's probably the most consistent album, even though it's definitely flirting with more commercial, more melodic, I wouldn't say glam or poppy kind of, even though it does flirt with that, it does have a very, somehow, a little bit of a Def Leppard feel, but it probably feels more like a better follow-up to Pyromania than, let's say, for example, Hysteria or Adrenalize or anything else that Def Leppard has released. But there's still some at least hints or at least of classic Saxon. I mean, Devil Rides Out is definitely more of a classic Saxon kind of track, especially like if you hear the live versions of it. It sounds like a classic Saxon track. But there's some other great songs I like on it. I do dig Everybody Up, probably because of due to the fact that it's actually what was featured in one of my, still one of my favorite Italian horror movies, Demons. Definitely a classic film. It's actually featured in that one. It's actually used towards the end of that film, and it's a very cool track. And I think it added a little bit to the atmosphere of the scenes, basically the overall chaos and whatnot. It's a great track. So, but there's I feel like it's probably the strongest of at least the ones post Demon Leather and Power and the Glory. There we go. Demon Leather's number 6. That's probably, if you listen to my review for the album as part of Album of the Week, you might know why, even though I think it's a very solid album, and I do like it a lot. Just that, compared to some of the other ones, I've got a little bit, a little on the bottom. Which is where we come to at least the debut album, which is a much, somehow a step above Demon Leather here, which is probably a shocker, because it's usually considered by many Saxon purists maybe their worst album, even though it's a debut album, and it's kind of at times put in the same sort of pantheon as like Rockarola from Judas Priest or the debut Accept album. It's a very different kind of album. And again, I kind of even throw in the original Australian version of High Voltage from AC/DC in that sort of same in that same category too, because that was kind of a very different sounding album for AC/DC as well. It's like, again, the debut album from these bands are usually very different sounding, but even though you might get some hints on what was going to come afterwards, but still, it is a little bit different. It's the same here, but for some reason, when I was really getting into Saxon, since all I had heard at the time was Wheels of Steel and Strong Arm of the Law, and little bits in there of Demon Leather, and of course Power and the Glory, and of course, I'll get into again, Unleash the Beast. Somehow, it was one of the more albums I really listened to a lot. I actually, since I was really getting into them, I decided to check out the first album as well, and for some reason at the time, I really liked it. And to this day, even though it's definitely not an album that I tend to go to a lot, but there's a little bit of a nostalgia factor towards it. I got a little bit of a sentimental feeling towards the album, because again, it was one of the really early Saxon albums I actually had heard that somehow it seems to really hold a bit of a place in my heart there. So that's why it's at number 5. It's not necessarily meaning that it's the best album, but it's definitely one of the ones that I played a lot. So that's one of the main reasons why I got it up there. that high. That's the reason why the top 5 list here is interesting, because these are actually the top 5 Saxon albums that I've listened to a lot, and some that I listened to a lot over the years. So that's one of the many reasons, and that's why we get into Unleash the Beast. Because when I was really getting into Saxon, I kind of blabbed it to my brother at the time that I was actually very interested on checking out Saxon. He probably then went and apparently said something to at least Sean, because at least my cousin Sean. He said it to him because of that. At the time, they were actually going to be seeing Metallica at the Save Mart Center in Fresno, California, and since he was probably on that, had to be that same day. And I think since I kind of said that, and my cousin Sean was probably right next to him, he probably then told him, "Hey, I got a copy of Unleash the Beast. I'll burn him a copy, and he will check that one out." And so when I went down to Fresno for at least to celebrate my sister's birthday, I was then handed my burned copy of Unleash the Beast, and also, funny enough, actually, or at least actually more so, not really funny enough, it's really more interesting enough that I was handed also a copy of Warrell Dane's solo album, a burned copy of that one, which at the time I didn't know who Warrell Dane was, so I didn't really find out about that he was the singer for Sanctuary until I actually had gotten the video game Brutal Legend, the one with Jack Black. So, which had a great fucking soundtrack too. Either way, I didn't really know about who that was, but that's what I was given, that, and of course the burned copy and Unleash the Beast. And since, of course, going to Raspin that same month, or at least during that week I was down there visiting, I, of course, finally ended up picking up my copy of Wheels of Steel, which would then serve as my pretty much the first Saxon album that I ever really bought, even though Unleash the Beast might be the first one I actually had listened to on a fully actually, which is really interesting there. That's one of the reasons why Unleash the Beast is at number 4, so it's the one that I've really spent the most over the years. And of course, I didn't really get to obtain an actual copy of Unleash the Beast until 2018 as part of the Solid Book of Rock set. So I do have an actual copy of it, but for the longest time I had a burned copy, and I listened to that album a lot of times, so that's why it's at number 4. And I can't, there might be a day where I'll finally spotlight that album as part of a Album of the Week episode. So there we go. Finally, number 3, reason Pound the Glory is up there again. One of the early Saxon albums I really got to listen to a lot and really spend time with. Great album though. Definitely one of my personal favorites. Storm of the Law was the second Saxon album that I actually had purchased, and it is one of my favorite albums of them too. Finally, reason is for Wheels of Steel at number 1 is because it was the very first one that I ever really got, because I had gotten that album at the time in February of 2009 at Raspin, along with a copy of On Through the Night from Def Leppard. So again, all of that is sentimental. Again, all classic albums in my opinion, but there we go. There you go. There is my top 12 Saxon albums. Hopefully I explained myself decent enough about my reasons why the albums, which albums are basically on which number, you know, which part they are in the list, how high they were up, how low they were. You know, I hope that at least I was able to explain myself why. So there you go. Thank you for Storm Rider for sending in that question. So I hope all of you enjoyed all of that. So there we go. I guess that's it then. That's pretty much it for this. Don't know what else I can really add into this episode. I think that's going to be a pretty short one. So if you have anything else you want to really ask me about, again, if you want to pretty much get in any, basically send me any sort of questions to me. Again, you know where to go to. Again, you can leave them in the comment section below, or you can message me the questions via the NastyMetalProductions Gmail account, or you can do it again, maybe if you're friends with me on Facebook, or at times maybe on Twitter. I don't know. If you're friends with me there, you can send me questions via there. So there we go. hope all of you enjoyed. Again, I don't know when there'll be the next, when episode number 100 and, episode number 21 is going to come out of the Nasty Metal podcast, but who knows? Might be later this year, later this month in October, or it could be in the beginning of November. Who knows? So, hope all of you enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.